The Xerax Empire had never seen a world as small and chaotic as Earth when their fleet first descended into the planet's orbit. The Xerax were conquerors by birth, and training their empire expanding across galaxies and star systems, dominating each civilization they encountered through sheer technological might, and the power of their relentless armies. Earth seemed like it would be no different to them, a primitive blue-green marble, where beings barely knew how to reach their own moon, let alone the stars. The Xerax High Command looked upon Earth's surface with a kind of amused arrogance. Their surveillance drones buzzed through Earth's atmosphere hidden from human eyes, scanning continents and cities, while transmitting live data to their fleet orbiting high above. The readings were almost comical to the Xerax commanders, who took pride in their advanced civilization. For millennia, the Xerax Empire had mastered energy manipulation, interdimensional travel weaponry, capable of destroying entire ecosystems in seconds. But here on Earth, what did they find? Guns, tanks, planes made of metal, all clunky and slow by Xerax standards. It was as if they were looking at the remains of a long-extinct civilization, grasping desperately for relevance against an enemy they couldn't even comprehend. The humans posed no threat, or so the Xerax thought, as they analyzed data streams, showing cars bustling along highways and small aircraft dotting the skies. The Xerax were amused. How could such an unsophisticated species even hope to defend itself from the Xerax invasion? They would be crushed effortlessly, without a single Xerax casualty. The commanders were certain they had conquered species with technology far beyond what these humans possessed, and they had subdued worlds with fortifications that made Earth look like an ancient relic. No one in the High Command doubted that this campaign would be over in a matter of days. With everything prepared, the Xerax Command initiated the first step of their invasion plan, sweeping down from orbit in dark metallic ships that shimmered ominously in the night sky, moving quickly to establish their presence before the humans even understood what was happening. In mere minutes, several large cities were blanketed in dark clouds as the Xerax ships obscured the sun, casting an eerie green hue over entire landscapes. The invasion was a meticulously calculated assault meant to terrify humans before they even saw their alien oppressors. The sight of those immense hovering vessels alone was enough to send civilians into a panicked streets filled with people fleeing to any shelter they could find. The Xerax watched it all through their surveillance channels, amused by the chaos below. For all the rumors of human resistance and defiance, they were no different than any other prey species. When the time came for them to face true power, humans were scrambling, retreating, hiding, like ants disturbed by the cruel poke of a stick. The Xerax commanders took this as proof of their superiority. They broadcast a message to the humans below, a cold, booming voice that echoed through every available transmission line and device across the globe. Surrender or be obliterated, the voice declared in dozens of human languages, a message clear and brutal. They waited patiently as the message spread their calculations, showing them that humanity would quickly break under the weight of such an overwhelming force. The humans had nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. They would surrender or they would perish. As the Xerax fleet hovered menacingly above Earth cities, the calm superiority of the alien commanders began to morph into a mocking sense of disdain. The broadcasts continued on every major channel across the globe, flooding news stations and interrupting daily broadcasts with the chilling ultimatum: surrender or be obliterated, repeated in all the languages they had deciphered from human transmissions. This wasn't a request, it was a command, one that brooked no delay or negotiation. The humans, their governments scattered across continents, appeared disorganized and slow to respond. The Xerax saw this as further confirmation of human frailty and weakness. The humans did not react with the efficient speed of a trained interstellar force. Instead, there was confusion, chaos, civilians taking to the streets, running in every direction, not knowing where to find safety. The Xerax commanders watched this response with faint amusement, hardly seeing it as worth their energy or time. The invasion was so inevitable that they viewed it more as a performance than a true war. Every Xerax officer on the bridge of the main cruiser could feel the thrill of dominance seeping through the air. No soldier doubted that the planet would fall without resistance worth noting. They looked over their initial surveillance reports, which revealed a curious mix of human technology armored vehicles they called tanks primitive metal shells that rolled over dirt and asphalt with clanking tracks and wheels. Then they had airplanes made of lightweight materials that flew barely past the sound barrier. The humans had what appeared to be missiles, but the explosives were crude, relying on chemical reactions to propel them forward. The Xerax engineers scoffed at these reports, seeing no comparison to their own energy weapons that could disintegrate or destabilize objects on a molecular level. But then a faint murmur passed among the Xerax tactical teams, as some of the commanders on the bridge noted increased radio chatter among human military forces across their secured channels. Xerax analysts intercepted communications revealing that various human governments were assembling military responses. The activity was notable, but largely dismissed. Even so, the Xerax soldiers continued observing the humans, more out of curiosity than concern. At this point, the humans seemed to realize that diplomacy was not an option. Several messages transmitted by Earth leaders attempted to establish contact, offering terms of peace. The Xerax fleet commander, General Krogar, observed these messages with amusement, allowing them to play out across the command deck before simply deleting each transmission. No negotiation could take place here. Earth's submission was the only option. Any human attempt at diplomacy was met with silence, further reinforcing the belief that Earth was on its knees. But somewhere amidst the scattered reports and hurried messages, human forces were mobilizing. The Earth rumbled as large armored vehicles were pulled out of hidden bunkers near major cities. An undercurrent of defiance could be felt even in the intercepts, as radio channels buzzed with rallying calls for protection of their cities and their people. The faint strains of human courage and determination emerging in the face of imminent doom. Tanks, massive mechanical beasts with steel hulls and roaring engines, began assembling on the outskirts of cities. Soldiers whose spirits seemed undeterred by the alien threat, prepared to defend their home planet with everything they had. Yet the Xerax fleet remained unimpressed. They saw the tanks rolling across highways and grasslands, positioning themselves strategically around key locations. But to the aliens, it was a laughable show of bravado. What could these fragile metal contraptions do against the power of the Xerax? As dawn broke across Earth, the invasion commenced in full force. The Xerax fleet descended from the skies, casting shadows that stretched across entire cities, their ships moving with the silent precision of predators. Stalking helpless prey, Xerax drop pods began falling from the hovering vessels, breaking through the atmosphere like blazing comets. As they aimed for key locations, the impact of each pod shook the ground, leaving smoldering craters from which squads of alien soldiers emerged, their armored forms gleaming in the light of the burning cities. Xerax infantry poured out into the streets, their tall armored frames imposing as they spread out with mechanical efficiency, scanning for signs of resistance. They carried weapons far beyond anything humanity had ever seen, energy rifles that hummed with a deadly glow, plasma grenades capable of vaporizing entire squads in a single blast. The streets were deserted. Civilians had fled in every direction, seeking shelter anywhere they could, though none felt truly safe, knowing that the aliens had come to conquer and not to negotiate. But as the Xerax spread deeper into the cities, they began to notice signs of unexpected resistance. Small units of human soldiers, hidden in alleyways or behind makeshift barricades, opened fire as the aliens approached, bullets peppering the air with a futile attempt at defense. The Xerax shrugged off these attacks, their armor absorbing most of the impact with ease, and their soldiers barely breaking formation. As they advanced, they saw nothing but chaos, and fear the resistance laughable to the trained and ruthless Xerax soldiers who were used to facing far more dangerous foes across the galaxy. Still, the humans continued to resist their soldiers, fought with a desperation that the Xerax found almost pitiable, as if they genuinely believed they could make a difference. For a while the Xerax allowed them to struggle, almost amused by the display, but soon the alien commanders grew tired of the spectacle. They issued an order for full suppression of human forces across all cities, instructing their soldiers to eliminate any resistance with brutal efficiency. They had no need for prisoners, or for demonstrations of mercy. Humanity was to be subjugated and broken, nothing more. It was then, as the Xerax soldiers were sweeping through city streets, that a deep rumble echoed across the ground, something unfamiliar and ominous. As the Xerax forces turned toward the sound, a column of massive human tanks rolled into view, their armored bodies reflecting the harsh sunlight. Each tank was a behemoth on treads, painted in dark green camo and covered in heavy armor plating that looked almost medieval compared to the sleek technology of the Xerax. Yet as they approached, the rumbling grew louder and more intense, rattling the ground beneath the Xerax's feet. The lead tank fired first, the thunderous boom echoing across the city as a shell blasted out of its barrel and hurtled toward the alien soldiers. The Xerax scattered in surprise, their reflexes honed for energy-based combat, not for the blunt force impact of human artillery. The shell hit a Xerax formation with devastating accuracy, the explosion sending shards of metal and debris flying in all directions. The Xerax were stunned by the sheer physical force of the attack. They had expected energy pulses and small projectiles, but not something of this raw destructive power. More tanks joined the fray, lining up in formation and firing in coordinated strikes. The alien forces reeled as each blast tore through their ranks, their energy shields crackling under the onslaught. The Xerax had never encountered such relentless, pounding a barrage of firepower that seemed crude by their standards, yet it was undeniably effective. Human tanks moved with surprising agility for their size, their thick armor absorbing plasma blasts that would have disintegrated lesser vehicles. The alien soldiers found themselves in an unexpected struggle, forced to fall back as each tank shell detonated with earth-shaking impact. The Xerax commanders watched in disbelief from their positions above, stunned by this display of brute force and resilience. They had never expected the humans to possess such machines that, despite their primitive appearance, seemed nearly unstoppable. The human tanks kept coming, a seemingly endless line of armored vehicles rolling forward with a fearlessness that shook the Xerax forces to their core. The Xerax soldiers, who had anticipated an easy campaign, were now faced with the unrelenting power of machines built not just to defend, but to destroy. These tanks were nothing like the sleek, energy-based vehicles of the Xerax, which relied on shield systems and delicate targeting optics. The human tanks were blunt instruments of destruction with thick armor and devastating firepower, as if designed for one purpose alone: to turn the battlefield into a wasteland. The Xerax tried to regroup, recalculating their strategy, but their communications were being disrupted. Human commanders had anticipated the Xerax's technological superiority and were using jammers and counter-signal devices to scramble their enemies' transmissions. Xerax squads found themselves unable to contact their commanding officers, stranded in the streets with only their basic training to rely on. Panic was spreading among the ranks for the first time since the campaign began. These seasoned warriors felt the edge of fear as human tanks pressed closer, their cannons booming with relentless power. The battle was brutal and unrelenting. At every street corner and intersection, the Xerax soldiers tried to hold their ground, setting up plasma turrets and laying energy mines to slow the human advance. But the tanks plowed through like unstoppable behemoths. Their heavy treads ground up asphalt and concrete as they moved undeterred by the plasma fire streaking across the streets. The human tank operators worked with a fierce precision, targeting any Zirax formations, in sight with shells that exploded on impact, sending alien soldiers scattering in every direction. One Zirax commander, known for his calm strategic mind, found himself at a loss. He had fought on dozens of planets, conquered species whose weapons could incinerate soldiers in a blink, but these humans fought differently. They used weapons that seemed ancient by Zirax standards, yet they wielded them with unmatched ferocity. The commander watched as one of his heavy armored units was blown to pieces by a coordinated volley from 3 tanks, their shells tearing through Zirax shielding systems as if they were made of glass. In an attempt to turn the tide, Zirax forces deployed their aerial drones, sleek devices designed to strike from above with pinpoint accuracy. These drones hovered over the human tanks, firing energy blasts at their weakest points. But to the shock of the Zirax, every tank was equipped with countermeasures devices that fired clouds of chaff and high-energy flares that blinded the drones' targeting systems, rendering their attacks useless. The drones dropped from the sky one after another, crashing to the ground in fiery heaps. In the heat of battle, human infantry moved in behind the tanks, taking advantage of the protection offered by the armored giants. They worked with remarkable coordination, using handheld weapons to clear buildings and protect the tanks from flanking maneuvers. The Zirax had never seen such synergy between machine and soldier, their own forces, relying heavily on automated support and precise tactics. But these humans fought with an intensity that bordered on desperation. By midday, the alien forces were in disarray, having lost their foothold in key sections of the city. Zirax soldiers attempted to retreat, regrouping in smaller units to escape the relentless advance of the human tanks. Yet everywhere they turned, they faced resistance, human soldiers firing from fortified positions, and tanks blocking escape routes. The Zirax saw their plans unraveling, their mighty invasion faltering against an enemy that refused to surrender or be crushed. High above in the flagship, the Zirax fleet commander watched the battle unfold, his confidence slipping as he observed the destruction wrought by these massive human machines. Each tank seemed to embody an indomitable spirit, a force that would not be intimidated or broken. For the first time, he questioned the wisdom of their approach. This so-called inferior species was proving to be far more formidable than any Zirax commander could have anticipated. As the day wore on, the battle continued to rage with no signs of slowing. The ground shook beneath the weight of advancing human tanks, while explosions echoed like thunder through the city streets. The sun hung high in the sky, casting long shadows across the devastation, and revealing the stark reality of war. Buildings lay in ruins, vehicles were scattered like toys, and the air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning debris. Everywhere the humans fought with a raw tenacity that surprised the Zirax soldiers, who had underestimated their resolve. Human commanders sensed the tide was shifting, and they capitalized on every inch, gained, pushing forward with renewed vigor. The tanks moved in relentless waves, their engines roaring as they crushed anything in their path. A sense of unity flowed through the ranks of human soldiers. They fought not just for survival, but for their homes, their families, their very existence. Their determination fueled their advance, and as each tank fired its cannon, it was a declaration of defiance against the invaders. The Zirax had initially thought they would crush the humans without breaking a sweat, but as the battle dragged on, the tide began to turn. The alien forces found themselves encircled in several key districts, unable to retreat as human forces pressed in from all sides. Each attempted escape met with fierce resistance, human infantry pouring into the streets, firing weapons that echoed like thunder as they closed in on their enemies. Amid the chaos, a small group of human soldiers, led by Captain Adrian Keller, managed to flank a sizable contingent of Zirax troops. They used the urban environment to their advantage, sneaking through narrow alleyways and hidden passages. Their movements were calculated precise as they positioned themselves to ambush the unsuspecting alien squad. The element of surprise was theirs as they opened fire with a coordinated attack that shattered the Xerax's ranks. The alien soldiers scrambled for cover, but it was too late. The humans pressed their advantage, launching grenades that detonated in blinding flashes and bursts of shrapnel as they moved with a speed and efficiency born from desperation and determination. The commander of the Xerax squad barely had time to issue a warning before the ambush unfolded his troops, falling one by one to the onslaught of human firepower. Meanwhile, the larger battle continued to unfold across the city. The tanks roared forward, plowing through barricades and overcoming energy shields that had previously protected the alien forces. The cries of the wounded and dying filled the air as the humans pressed on their resolve unbroken. The Xerax were losing their grip on the city, and their spirits began to falter for the first time. In the command center of the flagship, the fleet commander struggled to maintain control over his troops. The initial confidence he felt at the beginning of the invasion was waning rapidly. Reports flooded in detailing the losses sustained at the hands of the human resistance. He turned to his tactical officer, a creature of cold calculation, who was now visibly shaken by the unfolding chaos. "We must regroup and reconsider our approach," the commander said, his voice barely masking the urgency of the situation. "The humans are organized, they are adapting. We cannot continue this frontal assault without incurring greater losses." Yet as the commander spoke, the sounds of battle grew closer, a cacophony of explosions, and the roar of tank engines filled the air surrounding the flagship. They were no longer fighting a simple skirmish against an inferior species, but a brutal conflict against a determined enemy that had risen from the ashes of despair. In the streets below, the human soldiers rallied around their tanks, their spirits ignited by the successes they had achieved together. They moved forward into the heart of the city, where the fiercest fighting awaited them, determined to drive the invaders from their home. They pressed on each tank, firing with a deafening boom as it shattered the defenses of the encroaching alien forces. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting an orange hue across the battlefield, the humans were ready for whatever came next. They were no longer the helpless prey in the eyes of the Xerax. They were warriors defending their world with every ounce of strength they possessed. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the battlefield, the tide of battle began to shift decisively in favor of the humans. The city was ablaze with chaos, but amid the destruction, a fierce unity had emerged among the human defenders. Each tank and soldier fought with the ferocity of desperation, every shell fired, and every bullet spent fueled by a determination to reclaim their world. The once overwhelming confidence of the Xerax was now a distant memory, as they faced a reality that no amount of technological superiority could alter. The human tanks pressed deeper into the heart of the city, each roar of their engines a battle cry that echoed through the air. The sight of them rolling forward inspired those who had remained hidden in fear to join the fight. The once empty streets, now filled with resistance fighters, rallying around the armored giants, their hearts ignited by the possibility of victory. They took to makeshift barricades armed with anything they could find, from rifles to Molotov cocktails, ready to stand against the alien invaders. Meanwhile, the Xerax forces attempted to regroup, but their command structure was fracturing. Orders from above grew increasingly chaotic as the reports of losses mounted across the battlefield. The once precise strategies began to devolve into desperate attempts to salvage what remained of their invasion. The commander's voice echoed through the communication lines, urging his troops to hold the line, but the spirit of the Xerax soldiers wavered. The very confidence that had driven them to invade was eroded by the relentless human advance. Amidst the turmoil, Captain Keller and his unit executed daring maneuvers to flank the remaining Zirax positions. Coordinating with other human squads, they established a network of communication that allowed them to share intel and mobilize forces more effectively. They had come to understand the alien tactics and weaknesses, and began exploiting them with terrifying efficiency. As human infantry supported by the tanks moved through the streets, they discovered hidden caches of weapons and ammunition long forgotten and unused. With each discovery, their confidence swelled. They began to see themselves not as mere defenders, but as liberators fighting to reclaim their world. The tanks continued to provide cover fire, blasting away at alien strongholds. As infantry surged forward, their spirits bolstered by the success they had achieved, every victory, large or small, seemed to light a fire within their hearts, spurring them on as they pushed against the remaining alien forces. As night fell, the battlefield transformed into a surreal landscape, illuminated by the glow of fires and explosions. The humans pressed on, determined to drive the Zirax from their land. They were no longer fighting for survival alone, they were fighting for their future, for the very essence of what it meant to be human. They had tasted victory, and it invigorated them. On the other side, the Zirax found themselves backed into a corner. The remnants of their once mighty forces were dwindling, facing mounting losses, and an enemy that fought with the strength of desperation. They had never anticipated a protracted engagement, or a resistance that would adapt and evolve before their eyes. As fear began to grip the alien soldiers, their discipline started to break apart. Isolated units scattered and became prey for the advancing human troops. In the command center, the Zirax fleet commander realized that the battle had turned decisively against them. With mounting losses and dwindling morale, he summoned his top officers to devise a new plan. The initial assumption that the humans would crumble before their might had proven fatal, and now they had to confront the brutal truth: they were losing the war. As the meeting unfolded, the air was thick with tension. The officers exchanged glances, reflecting a fear that had not been present since the beginning of the invasion. No longer were they the conquerors they had envisioned, but a species struggling to maintain control over a world that had risen against them. The commander clenched his fists, determined to regain the upper hand, yet deep inside, he knew the tide had shifted irreparably. The outcome of the battle now hung in a delicate balance that was slipping away with each passing moment. As the Zirax commanders deliberated in their command center, the atmosphere grew heavy with uncertainty. Each officer presented their thoughts, but the discussion quickly devolved into heated arguments. Overhead, the sounds of battle intensified. The rumble of tanks and the distant explosions of gunfire echoed through the air, a stark reminder of the chaos unfolding below. The commander struggled to maintain order, his mind racing as he contemplated their next move. "We must regroup and launch a counter-offensive," he finally declared, his voice firm, despite the doubts creeping in. "It is our only option. The humans may have gained ground, but they cannot sustain this momentum forever. Our technology, our training will prevail if we strike now." Some of his officers nodded while others hesitated, knowing the risks involved in such a maneuver. The tide of battle had shifted. The humans were emboldened and more organized than anticipated. Launching a counter-offensive could lead to more losses, but the commander was adamant. He could not allow fear to dictate their next steps. They were soldiers of the Zirax Empire, not cowards. Meanwhile, on the ground, human soldiers were not merely surviving, but thriving. Keller and his unit had taken up positions near a critical intersection in the city where they could coordinate with other human squads. They had learned to anticipate Zirax movements, their determination to drive the invaders back strengthening with each small victory. Tanks rolled beside them, providing cover as they prepared for what they believed would be the final push to reclaim their city. Human intelligence reports indicated that the Zirax were disorganized on the ground and struggling to maintain a coherent line of defense. A sense of excitement coursed through the human ranks as they prepared to exploit this weakness. Captain Keller gathered his soldiers, outlining the plan of attack. "We have the advantage now," Keller said, his voice steady, "and commanding we push forward and strike where they are weakest. We will hit them hard and fast, taking them by surprise. They expect us to be on the defensive, but we will show them that we are ready to fight back." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a red hue over the battlefield, the humans steeled themselves for the impending assault. They knew they were fighting for their very survival, but there was also a fierce hope among them, a belief that they could reclaim their world, that they could push back against the invaders who had underestimated them. As the command for the assault was given, tanks surged forward, their engines roaring as they led the charge into the fray. The streets erupted in a cacophony of sound, tanks firing artillery shells, while infantry charged behind them, weapons blazing. The air crackled with the tension of battle, and the humans pushed forward each step, bringing them closer to their goal. But the Xirax were ready, or so they believed. They had anticipated a counteroffensive of some sort, and had set traps throughout the city, energy mines concealed beneath debris, and barricades waiting to be triggered by unsuspecting human soldiers. As the tanks rolled forward, the Xirax waited for the opportune moment. Suddenly the ground shook with explosions as the hidden mines detonated. The humans stumbled as the blasts rocked their advance, but they quickly regained their footing. The tanks roared defiantly, firing back at the hidden threats. The sight of human soldiers moving through the dust and smoke igniting a fierce determination. Captain Keller shouted commands, rallying his troops to press on. The humans had faced adversity before, and they were not about to falter now. They pushed through the chaos, each soldier a beacon of hope, as they fought to reclaim their home. They had become more than just defenders. They were warriors united against a common enemy. As the assault continued, the battle raged fiercely, the humans moving with purpose and precision. The air filled with the sounds of conflict, the clash of metal against metal, and the cries of those who fought for their lives. Their spirits soared, fueled by the knowledge that they were no longer the underdogs, but a force to be reckoned with. The Xirax commanders watched in horror as their carefully laid plans began to unravel. The human resistance was relentless, and they had underestimated the spirit of this world. They could no longer deny it. The battle had become a fight for survival, and the outcome remained uncertain as the clash of two worlds reached its climax. As the battle intensified, the streets transformed into a chaotic battlefield. Every corner echoed with the sounds of gunfire and explosions. The once bustling city now lay in ruins, a stark reminder of the devastation that had unfolded. But amidst the destruction, a new hope flickered in the hearts of the human defenders. They fought with a tenacity that defied all odds, their spirits unyielding against the alien onslaught. Captain Keller and his unit pressed forward, determined to exploit every opportunity. The tanks roared beside them, their cannons firing with precision as they targeted the encroaching Xirax forces. The humans had developed a rhythm, a dance of destruction that reverberated through the chaos. As they coordinated their movements, each step forward an act of defiance against their oppressors. With every enemy soldier they took down, their confidence grew. They had witnessed their friends fall, but they had also seen victories. Each explosion and shattered enemy line fueled their resolve. The humans had become a formidable force, united by a common goal: to protect their homes and reclaim their world from the grip of the Xirax. The Xirax commanders now faced the reality of their predicament. Reports of losses flooded in, each one a blow to their already wavering morale. The once mighty forces that had descended from the stars with such confidence were being pushed back, retreating under the relentless pressure of human resistance. The commander clenched his jaw, frustration boiling within him as he realized their situation was dire. "We must regroup and find a way to hold the line," he shouted to his officers, desperation creeping into his voice. "The humans are stronger than we anticipated. We cannot afford to lose this battle." But the officers exchanged worried glances. Many were beginning to question their chances of victory. The human resolve was unbreakable, their tactics, surprisingly effective. The commander struggled to maintain his composure as the sounds of battle raged around them. He knew they needed a plan, but the very essence of their superiority had crumbled before his eyes. On the ground, human forces continued to press their advantage. With every inch they gained, they pushed the Xerax deeper into retreat. The tanks fired in unison, their cannons booming, as they targeted the remaining alien strongholds. The sound was deafening, but it was a symphony of hope for the human soldiers who pressed on. Captain Keller led the charge, moving toward the heart of the remaining Xerax defenses. He could see the fear etched on the faces of the alien soldiers, who were now disorganized and demoralized. They had fought with the belief that they were invincible, but now that belief was faltering as they faced an enemy that refused to back down. As the humans closed in, the commander of the Xerax forces knew they were on the verge of defeat. The once clear and calculated strategies had devolved into desperate measures. They had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. With a final surge of determination, Keller led his unit into the heart of the Xerax defenses. His voice rang out above the chaos, urging his soldiers forward. With every step they took, they were reclaiming their world inch by inch, and with a roar that echoed through the streets, they pushed into the very core of the alien stronghold. The human tanks fired with renewed vigor, blasting through barricades and defenses that had once seemed impenetrable. The humans pressed on, fueled by the desire to protect their families and their way of life. They had become a force of nature, an unstoppable tide that swept through the remnants of the alien presence. In a final push, the last remnants of the Xerax forces attempted to mount a counterattack, but it was too late. The humans surged forward, overwhelming the remaining defenders. With a roar of triumph, Captain Keller raised his weapon high, the victory cry of humanity echoing through the streets. The tide had turned, the battle was theirs, and they had proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the spirit of humanity could not be extinguished. As the last of the Xerax forces fell, the humans stood amidst the wreckage of war, a new dawn breaking over their battered city. They had fought valiantly, and in their victory they had found strength and unity that would carry them into the future. They were no longer merely survivors, they were warriors, and as they looked toward the horizon, they saw the promise of a new beginning, one forged in the fires of conflict and the unbreakable will of humanity.